a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's sink or swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's sink or swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. Welcome to the shrimp tank. Wanna put it all together, this is big things. Doing big things, chasing big dreams. Yeah, it's all real, this life's all that it seems. All the chicks scream, all the dudes yell. This is just what I do and I do it well. With the flow fresher than the new shoe smell. Going through hell, well homie keep going. You know the saying, you can reap what you sow in. So I don't chase girls, I just chase dreams. Play the same game, but we ain't in the same league. Running a campaign, Roadie 2016. Like a phone to die, put me in charge. I'm a general, from the front I'ma lead the charge. Like a federal, fell on my lap never. Going hard as ever.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Shrimp Tank here in Boca Raton. We're on the campus of Florida Atlantic University, and we will be talking to an entrepreneur who will give us some insights into his business, his tips and tricks for being successful in the entrepreneurial world of real estate. First, though, I want to say our usual host, Jason Hill, and our other co-host, Kevin Cox, are up at the Florida Veterans Business Pitch Competition, where two FAU entrepreneurs who are veterans are going to be pitching their ideas and hopefully bringing home some prize money. And also, they were at the Florida Venture Forum yesterday, and that is where our students go up and pitch. So we have a very active entrepreneurship program here, and we also participate in the Shrimp Tank. And I don't know if I introduced myself, did I, Stephanie? I might have. Roland Kidwell. I'm the Carl DeSantis Professor of Management and Entrepreneurship here in the College of Business and work very closely with the Adams Center for Entrepreneurship. So before we start in with our guest, I want to welcome a new co-host on board, Jamie Allison. Jamie is an adjunct professor here in marketing at Florida Atlantic. And Jamie, why don't you give us a little background, tell us a little bit about yourself as we get into our conversation with our guest today.
Thanks so much, Roland, for the introduction. And Phil, very nice to talk with you in a bit.
Thank you for having me.
I'm a new resident and traveled far from Michigan for all my years. I grew up in Michigan and just recently moved to Florida. But while I was in Michigan, I attended my professional careers at Ford Motor Company, where I spent all my years there. I was the director of Ford Racing for a stint. And then I concluded my career at Ford as the chief product officer for Ford Pass, which is the digital transformation of Ford.
So you were in the movie Ford versus Ferrari.
I was.
Fantastic.
I was the stunt driver of the car.
No kidding. Well, we're going to have to get you over here and have you as a guest pretty soon here.
Thank you so much, Roland.
Yes, absolutely. Great to meet you. Great to have you here today with us. Our guest today is Phil Gutman, and Phil is founder of Gutman Development Marketing. And welcome, Phil. And tell us a little bit about yourself and about your business.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you all for having me. My mic okay? Little bit about myself. I grew up in Staten Island, New York. I moved to South Florida in the late 90s and started off dabbling in the mortgage end of the real estate business. I shortly realized that my calling was not sitting in front of the actual computer screen and talking to the screen all day long. So I was looking, and I was a little lost for a minute, to be honest. I was 22, 23 years old. And then I realized that the real estate side, the side of me connecting with the actual clients, actually getting out there, looking at properties, and eventually locating land for new development, and inserting myself into the sales and marketing side of it is where I found my niche in the real estate world.
So did you start as a real estate agent or start in that process?
Oh,
and then
I'm still licensed. I kept that license the whole time.
Okay, so that was your start was you were helping people buy houses, sell houses.
Yes, correct. When I first got my license, I was right in the middle of South Beach in the heyday. And at that time, there was a lot of renovations and conversions happening of the small little 2-story rental buildings, and I was selling those $60,000, $80,000. I was doing a lot of business Back then, I was working for a company called Majestic Properties.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward the movie a little bit, a new project launched there by the name of Continuum, which was a really high-end luxury building, 500,000 to probably $25 million purchases at the time. The developer took a liking to me, and they always say at some point in your career, you kind of wind up getting lucky. And that was kind of my lucky point. He hired me shortly after, shipped me off to Las Vegas, and I spearheaded the sales for the Cosmopolitan Resort and Casino and sold 1,875 units in probably a 14 to 16 month window. Almost 1.3 billion in sales there.
Okay, wow. And then you came back to Florida.
I came back to
Yep.
Florida. Shortly after that, I was hired by Douglas Elliman to be their VP of New Development in Miami. And after that, 4 years later, I was awarded presidency of Brown Harris Stevens, which is another pretty high-end real estate company, where I oversaw 200 general real estate agents. And then I realized that my true passion was for new development. I wound up locating a 7-lot parcel in a place called Bay Harbor Islands, which is just right outside of Val Harbor. And I brought it back to my old boss of the Cosmopolitan and Continuum, and he bought it, and I got myself back into the new development space.
Mm-hmm. So you started a business, your marketing business right now. Was that your first entrepreneurial venture, your first business?
It's interesting how this came about. So, developer's name is Bruce Eichner. He's the CEO of Continuum Companies. And, my relationship with him spans back over 20 years since I was first hired as a young kid. And I located the land, he purchased it. And then first thing I said to him was, okay, who are we going to hire? Which brokerage firm do you prefer? And he looked at me and he said, Phil, you've been with me now for over 20 years. Those big firms would hire you. Why would you want to give away all that money? And I thought about it for a second, and I'm like, you know what? You're right. So let's do this in-house. And I built an in-house sales team, which I continue to do for the Continuum Companies, who has several projects also coming in the near future in Miami and South Florida markets. In addition, I did realize there was a huge void in the market, and that void was the position of the person in between a developer and the brokerage firm that they hire. Because the brokerage firms have their own interest, the developers have their own interest, and somewhere in the middle is that position that will help monetize the actual sales for the developer. And being that I kind of grew up in real estate working for the developer and working for the brokerage, I kind of knew the balance between both.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to form my own real estate development / marketing company. And my phone has been extremely busy.
Well, I would think a lot of times entrepreneurs feel like they're taking moderate risks, but it doesn't seem like this was much of a risk at all for you because you were already in there.
I was already knee deep in it. I had the experience, several years working for corporate. I did it because I thought that that's what you're supposed to do in the real estate world. And shortly after, I realized that there was a better way to do things. And that better way was working for myself. I'm my own boss. I don't have to take direction from some of the corporate leaders who, for the most part, weren't actually on the ground. They weren't boots on the ground in the market that I knew.
So, Phil, you talked about this really the pathways to entrepreneurships that comes in both from different directions. A lot of people think entrepreneurships or people are just kind of born into it. They have this calling and they go start. But some people start in a corporate world and then kind of move into an entrepreneur world. Can you talk about what lessons you learned in a corporate environment that were applicable for you to help, transition into a kind of an entrepreneurial startup?
The biggest lessons that I think that I've learned is the documentation in an email.
From the corporate world.
In the corporate world, you really need to document everything. You need to keep notes. What helped me always was writing things down in a notebook. Those were lessons that I learned because one day when your boss or developer comes calling, you need an actual reference point. You need to be able to look. And now I have 4 or 5 different projects. If a developer calls me and says, "What's going on with Unit 705 in the North Bay Village project?" I need to know right away. There's no hold on, let me look.
What are some of the skill sets you found that are able to be transferable from your previous endeavors to this one?
It's funny because every couple of years I do some sort of gut check in the mirror, and I wind up asking my employers, bosses, friends, family, what about me is a little bit different than some of my other colleagues. And the biggest thing that I get is you're transparent, you're honest, you have the ability to deliver good or bad news better than anybody else that I know. And that I kind of learned in corporate. You need that even keel personality to really excel, because the development world, for example, you're doing a $400 million deal and sales are not really going the way you had planned. You need to be able to divert that on the dime and fix it and deliver that news to all of the people in the company and the developer, because you have to make that decision quickly, because every minute that you don't can cost hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay. Tell us about what you were doing in Las Vegas.
That was the game changer for me. So remember how I told you earlier that I wound up getting lucky? So little 20-year-old Phil gets shipped off to Las Vegas, and I wound up spearheading the sales for the Cosmopolitan Resort and Casino, which still stands now. And we sold 1,875 units in probably about a 16-month window and close to $1.3 billion worth of sales. And I think that's a record that still hasn't been broken till this day. And sometimes I still think about it. I sat in a room this size full of FedEx boxes of contracts ready to go out. We sold 600 units in one day out of the Four Seasons.
And this was right before the economic downturn.
We launched that project February 14th for Valentine's Day in 2005.
Okay. And so how many of these units did you have to repossess?
The good news is that they were all in hard contract.
Well, that's good, because the market down here was quite different, I believe, or at least it was the forerunner, I suppose, of what happened around the.
What happened in that 07-08 crisis, it was a banking crisis. It wasn't really a real estate crisis. And the one thing that I always said about South Florida, specifically at the time I was in the Miami market, was the velocity slowed down, but people weren't taking enormous haircuts. Those who weathered the storm, I think that was maybe an 8-month to 12-month perching period.
Mm-hmm.
And it came back with a vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain sectors in the United States that I think are resilient. Miami being one, and even though New York is going through something right now, I wouldn't count that out either at some point.
Okay.
So Phil, you talked about everybody needs a little bit of luck along their journey, right? You also hear this adage that kind of you make your own luck, and
True.
luck come to those who are prepared. Can you reflect a little bit on what you think, Bruce, it was, what he saw in you that made him kind of quote unquote make you lucky?
Yeah. So yes, I like to make the joke that luck is required. It is to a certain extent, but the best advice I can give is surround yourself with the right people. People look at you. They look at your close sphere of influence, your close friends, people that you network with. And if you keep yourself at a certain level, it starts to trickle down from there.
So the importance of mentoring we talk about a lot. Is there somebody you're mentoring now? And where do you see that person? If so, where do you see that person going in the future?
So the answer to the question is yes. I do have over a dozen salespeople on my projects. Some of them are completely seasoned. They've been on 7, 8 different projects. There's a need to curate new talent. And I look really close and hard, and I know right away if somebody has it in them to go into the new development space, or if they should stick to the general real estate space. Um, I have 3 or 4 people right now that I'm mentoring, and they're doing extremely well. There was one girl in particular that started maybe 3 months ago, and she's already done 2 deals sitting in house with us. And the learning curve is usually a little bit longer. But what she does is she sits down, she goes through a lot of the leads, for example, that have come in through our website that haven't converted. And she's sitting there cranking away on that phone all day, bringing the brokers back in. Like I always make a joke: if you throw her out the door, she comes back in the window. That's the type of that's what you need. That's the
So
drive.
could you differentiate a little bit between those two? You said new development space and the traditional real estate space. Talk a little bit about what the differences are there.
So in the new development world, what happens is you really it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's like a 9 to 12 job. I mean, you're living in that office space. Um, you're reporting to that project several times a week. So it's more like a job in a corporate environment. On the and those are the people that need the structure, that want the structure, that don't really function properly working from home, for example, or not having somebody keep an eye on them. Those people tend to do extremely well if you have the drive in new development. Now, there's also something called a general real estate agent. And those are the people that don't want to be tied down to anything. They want to do their several deals a year, vacation half of the year, go to the Hamptons, Aspen, wherever they want to go for months and weeks at a time. And they come back and they do some deals and they're happy with it. To take that sort of free spirit and try to like tie them down to an office is extremely difficult.
Okay. So, and you're focusing on this new development space of people who are constantly in there, constantly selling these new condos or
Yeah.
whatever. Okay, good.
Because when I was president of Brown Harris Stevens, that's when I kind of paused for a minute on new development, and I grew the firm from 60 to over 200 agents. So there was a lot of mentoring there,
Okay.
but I was dealing with mostly free spirits.
Yeah, we were joking on another program earlier about everybody down here has a real estate license. The question is, how much do you get? You're driving the Uber most of the time, and other times you might be doing a little real estate here and
Yeah,
there. But
look, that could be problematic too because excuse me, the proper training comes from boots on the ground in the field.
Mhm.
And when you're doing anything part-time or you're putting 20% of your effort into something, you can't expect to get the same results as if you were putting 100% in. A lot of people got their license because they witnessed people start to make a lot of money during good times, but they also weren't prepared to weather the storm when it's not, typical COVID effect, I like to call it.
do you feel like an entrepreneur? And if so, going back into your life, did you have influences there? Like, were your parents, did they run a business or anything like that? Or is this something unique?
It's interesting. I go through this with my parents all the time. Um, Growing up where I grew up, not a whole lot of pushing me into certain directions, to be honest with you. My father did have a jewelry manufacturing company, and I remember this is important to know. I remember not really applying myself the way I should have in school because I always thought in my head, worst case is I'm going to just go work in my father's company. And I had a guidance counselor tell me, well, what do you do if he closes the business or something happens to him? Never thought about it, right? A few years go by, building the business is done.
Ah,
It's
oh.
done. It's done. And they couldn't be more right. But
Mhm.
I then learned that you have to kind of create your own destiny. Don't take anything for granted that you're going to stumble into a family's business or a friend's business. You have to pave your own way.
What do you wish you'd learned in college that you need that wasn't taught, that you didn't have a class in?
I learned that the instant gratification is not always there. You you're building something from the ground up. And I went in there thinking that you go to school, you come out of school, and you're getting a job, and you're making money like that. And I had a hard time with that for a little bit because I always was the person that liked the instant gratification. But I realized that you need to have more patience and you need to put your time in.
What was your degree in?
Believe it or not, didn't finish with a degree.
No.
Didn't finish with a degree. It's something I still regret, but going back now is
Well, I'm sure we can arrange an honorary degree somehow.
that would be great.
At the end of this podcast, you and I can basically officiate them.
Certainly love that.
That would be wonderful. Can I get an FAU diploma and everything?
Well, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe you just need a couple classes. One never knows.
That would be awesome.
Phil, kind of building on this line of questions, it's a very competitive market that you're in, right? How do you identify and capitalize on these amazing opportunities? Do you look at kind of the rigor of analysis personally or with your team, or is it a lot of instinct that just something you sense after all these years, or leads come to you? I'm just curious to inspire others who are listening. Yeah. Sometimes, how do opportunities arise around you?
Good question. So let me fix my mic here. I think a lot of it has to do with just the time that I've spent in the business. I've watched the market through 5, 6, 7 cycles already in my career. What I personally focus on now is looking and identifying undervalued, underdeveloped land with some sort of access to water. I'll give you an example. Downtown Miami, landlocked, but there's probably 24 projects happening. That, to me, on the development side, is somewhat of a risk. We also identified a property in North Bay Village. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it connects Miami Beach to the downtown side. It's one little island that goes across and one street. We purchased the land there, and there's not a whole lot of competition around. Now they're starting to come, but I feel a lot safer and can put my head down at night with, properties like that.
And it's a very finite, I would think, set of properties. How do you do this? What do you do? Do you drive around and look, or do you look on the internet? How do you come to these find these properties?
So there's a couple ways. One, people know that I've been in the market this long already. That there are brokers and property sellers that know what development teams are in the market. So I do wind up getting a lot of phone calls and probably 2-3 emails a day of people offering specific properties. I do drive, I do look, I come across, I'm going to, for example, Bay Harbor Islands. Bay Harbor Islands is literally, you can walk to the front door of one of my properties to the Bal Harbor Shops, which is probably one of the most recognized shopping in the planet at this point, in 7 minutes. So I had my eye on these 7 pieces of land for 2-3 years, kept in touch with the sellers, just kept going at them. I see you're not doing anything with it. Why don't you let us purchase it? And kept going and kept going. And for the longest time, for example, Bay Harbor Islands couldn't break $800 a foot. And now I'm probably $1,500, $1,600 a foot in the area. But it's just being able to capitalize on some of the opportunity, and you're identifying something on the water that you can deliver something that's affordable, right? Because one of the other things too is this game, you kind of have to figure out your audience and your target demographic. And let's just say I'm doing 1,500 square foot units at $1,000 a foot. It's a $1.5 million apartment. There was a lot of developers out there that were chasing the $4,000 square foot market with 4,000 plus square feet, $16 million market, a lot less of a pool there. So I think that the most important thing on the new development side is identifying your actual buyer pool and building something for them. That old theory of build it and they will come, that was 7 cycles ago.
Well, I think we can move into our first commercial break here. And we'll be back with our hot segment of the show, where we'll ask Phil about what is hot in the Miami real estate market and maybe even in Las Vegas.
Perfect.
Join the fastest growing community of professionals on the internet with OWL. Access new networks and otherwise unreachable professional contacts through the one-on-one call feature on the app. Scroll through the list of available professionals and join them for a quick call to build rich connections, expand invaluable relationships, and to broaden your professional landscape without needing lofty referrals. OWL. We bring vetted pros to your doorstep 24/7 on demand. Join our community by signing up at owl.com today.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank here in Boca Raton. We're here with our guest, Phil Gutman, real estate expert, sales and marketing expert, new development expert. And Phil's going to tell us, because we really do want to know this, because Jamie and I are going to go out afterward and do some investigations here. What is hot in the Miami Beach real estate market?
Okay. So, hot properties. Miami's interesting in several ways, but one of the most fascinating things about Miami is that you're surrounded by water, but the access to get onto it is extremely limited. So I keep looking at undervalued development properties with water access. That's been my thing and my focus now for the last 4 or 5 years. I like, and I know this is a little bit of a self-promotion, but I do feel that I've landed in the right path here with the property selection. But we are pushing North Bay Village. I'm pushing Bay Harbor, and I also have a development site that we just secured, and we did a condo takeover and terminated the association, and now we're doing a ground up construction there, and that's on 93rd and Collins. There's a little area called Surfside, which is also completely isolated from the rest of the Miami market.
This isn't where that building collapsed, is it?
It is. It is. It is. It was extremely unfortunate. A lot of things transpired after that, meaning certain rules and regulations were put in place by DeSantis, and that one of the main things is full reserves. You can't waive reserves or have partial reserves in the condo buildings anymore. And what is going on now, a lot of buildings are 40 to 60 years old, and they need to do that. And some just can't afford to do it. So that presents sort of an opportunity for developers to go in, purchase the units at a premium, knock down the building, and do brand new ground up construction.
So that could be very hot, that market, if you can pay the people to sell and get out.
That's what I did on 93rd and Collins. Unit by unit, you have to get them all on board. And then once you get to the end, it's a long process, but that's the only way to create and develop brand new luxury real estate on the ocean.
Because the bottom line is the people who own these buildings were not keeping up with the maintenance.
Yeah.
And is that something that is a problem you're going to see in Miami Beach, I guess, or it'll be Miami, or just
I think
anywhere?
you'll see it all in South Florida, from Jacksonville all the way down to Miami. The problem is that everybody, likes to have a low overhead, and who wouldn't? So when you start to see the maintenance and the reserve starting to go up on the building, a lot of people are getting priced out, and they wind up resorting to having to sell. And then at some point, the building is just not worth doing a $60 or $80 million assessment. So it's easier for them all to get together and come to you as a group. Like the building we took down was 34 units. I'm going to replace it with 25, but a totally different product.
Can you stay on that topic a little bit, just to educate the people who are listening? I understand that when you have a condo arrangement, that at some point the developer, when there's enough current owners of these condos, that the developer is no longer making the calls. That becomes a local condo association. Could you maybe educate us a little bit? What happens in this case when now you sell the units, now you have the owners owning it, and now their own association?
So that's exactly what happens. What happens is we develop the building, we sell off piece by piece, to unit by unit, condo by one condo at a time, to end users. We turn over the association. We're out of the building. We no longer control it. So 40 years later, if we find a building, it's not most likely, it's 100% that there's a condo association to deal with. So we start with the board of directors, and talk about their level of interest to possibly sell,
Mhm.
they have to go and they have to get some sort of survey.
Mhm.
And who wants to? There's plenty of times that people say, I'm not leaving. I'm going to die here in this building. I'm not going anywhere. You'll have to pull me out sideways.
And you need 100% buy-in, or could it be a
No.
majority buy-in and then the rest?
You have to really look at the actual condo docs. Some of them say 80%. Some of them are 90. Some of them are, I think the state law now is 90. 90 or 95. I need to check. But for the most part, there's always going to be one or two people. And you don't want to be the last guy to hold.
Because at that point, if you're the last guy holding, you really no longer have any.
There's no more leverage.
There's no more leverage. Got it. Yeah.
There's no more leverage. We always try to do the right thing, but you can't just leave a 50-unit building with two people in there and it's a defunct building that's going to fall down.
What do you do?
There's litigation at that point.
So we'll save that for the plead the fifth segment.
No, look, it's unpreferred. Look, the only people that make money there is the legal bills, but yeah, you don't want to. It's just unnecessary.
So I assume hot is the water, but also hot is going up. It's not units that are on the ground. It's high rise.
High rise is doing really well in Miami, and if you can find a building that is heavily amenitized, that's also another trigger for a lot of people. They want to be able to go into their nice newer building and just have all of the things at their fingertips, because with 1,000 people a day that are moving to South Florida, the last thing that people really want these days is to have to travel in their car. I mean, I remember all too well an hour and a half on the bus from Staten Island into Wall Street. Never do it again.
You had to take a ferry too, didn't you?
I had a ferry. Yeah, it was a 30-minute ride to the ferry, and then 30 minutes over, and then.
But I saw the movie Working Girl. I know all about that.
But people, they like the live, work, play situation, and if it's a live, work, play, either on the water or right in the heart of a city like Brickell, for example, that has all the shopping and restaurants, and you go right downstairs, and that's our little version of Soho.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the two areas that I think are the hotspots.
Is it hot to sell to people or customers, buyers coming from, say, South America, coming from other countries? How much of that makes up the market there?
So I'll tell you, somebody asked me this question yesterday. So for one of the first times in my career, what I see that is quite different than all the other cycles. Sometimes it used to be we were only pulling from the Northeast, and then the Northeast would shut down and we would only pull from the South American markets. This time, you have major companies relocating to South Florida. And the amount of people, I know a lot of people might think that there's a ton of new development, but the truth is there's not enough. Because with the companies that are relocating, some of the other states and the other parts of the country that are not as advantageous to live in South Florida, they're coming. California, Texas, we're getting Chicago, New York, and now we're getting South America has lit up again completely, and we can't count out Europe either. So we have 3 different buckets all dumping into the South Florida market.
What would you say? I do and have been reading about international from European coming into Florida. What would you say is kind of the mix between the domestic, South American, and European?
I would say now it's been 50% domestic, 25 South American, and 25% European. And, look, depending on what goes on in different countries at any given time, whether it's a new election or
I see
something, all of a sudden you'll get an influx from the country, like Mexico, Argentina. I mean, we're getting a ton of business from there.
Well, I think Argentina would kind of go back to Argentina with this new guy, but I don't know.
Our leads are still coming in from Argentina.
Well, that was the opposition party, I guess, right? that comes up. Okay.
Yeah. So you were in Vegas. The young Phil was in Vegas. Can you maybe talk a little bit about? By the way, do you stay atop of the trends that are happening in Vegas and just contrast on what's going on in Vegas versus Miami?
So it happens to me by default, because I did that so many years ago. A lot of my developer friends now, I have a group here in South Florida they're developing the Four Seasons in Las Vegas. So I wound up getting phone calls by by default. I keep a very close eye on the market there. Vegas went through its ups and downs, but I see it on an upward trend now as well.
After COVID, right? Because obviously the destination and all that, right?
You know, after COVID, you could have thrown a grenade on Las Vegas Boulevard and killed nobody. You know, but it's not the case anymore. Vegas has picked back up.
And I assume it's more hot down here, and probably always has been for Miami compared to other places in South Florida that have year-round residents as opposed to snowbirds.
Yeah.
Where do they seem to be going these days?
The snowbirds?
Yeah.
All of my Altacaccos from Miami seem to wind up in North Carolina, Colorado, the Berkshires. It is getting a little hot and sticky here right now. Maybe I'm just getting older, but I can't wait to get to Colorado. But
are they still buying in Miami, or are they buying up the coast? Or
I think with age, what kind of happens is you start gravitating a little bit further north.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little easier to kind of deal with the.
It's easier to get around. The traffic is not as bad. Like I see the Jupiter markets heating up now. Wellington. After COVID, people wound up getting in touch with nature quite often. So now Ocala, ranches, horses.
How far north do you go in terms of looking for property to develop?
I'm looking at from Jupiter down, and I'm also looking on the west coast of Florida.
Yeah, that seems to be a hot area, I would think, as well.
Yeah, Sarasota, Tampa, Naples.
Can you talk about ocean, intercoastal? Obviously, if there's more intercoastal because of the two sides, or
Well,
in
this
general.
is actually a hot topic in Miami these days. Like, what's better, the intracoastal / bay or the beach? The truth is, I haven't stepped my pinky toe in sand in about 5 years. When you first come from New York or Chicago or wherever, that's a big concrete jungle. The only thing that's on your mind is landing in South Florida and being able to go out to the beach. And that's really good for 6 months, 8 months, a year. People wind up also having families. And there's a slow migration that happens from the beach to inland. Because beach, 3,000-4,000 a foot. Inland, 1,000 to 1,400 a foot. Buildings that are more heavily amenitized. Kids parks, dog parks. There's, both have its advantages.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you, we recently moved from Michigan, and you are so right. When we came here from Michigan, I was looking for properties on the beach because I just wanted to get up in the morning and step onto the sand, which was my dream, a dream of mine. But then I realized basically that was,
You and I can no longer bake on a lounge chair for 3 hours out of the day. It doesn't work anymore.
I ended up real far west.
Put a sandbox in here. Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Backyard,
There's
maybe.
no more baking with carrot oil anymore on the beach.
How about 5 years down the road? Are you projecting out that far? What's going to be hot in 5 years? What should I do now?
I'm already thinking about 5 years from now.
What should we be doing now? If you can share any secrets.
I've kept my same model the whole time. I'm watching the trends. I'm watching where there are wealthy, affluent people looking and where you see them starting to purchase homes. I've kept a close eye on Wellington for quite some time, and I watched that pricing run, and now there's major development happening there with major celebrities. So I think that if I wasn't doing something, for example, on the actual sand or intracoastal in Miami, my next passion project would be building a ton of townhomes on a 50-acre parcel with polo fields in the middle.
All right, so
That's my selfish personal thing.
Yes, we talked during a break about Phil's involvement in the polo community here a little bit. That's one of his hobbies. Is that hot? Polo hot?
I think it was overlooked for many years in the United States. And everybody, when you say polo, they're thinking about your polo shirt with the guy on the horse with a stick.
That's got to be very expensive, though, to get into that.
It is. It is. But I think that polo in the U.S. is going to pick up in a considerable way, the same way soccer started to with the whole Messi effect.
Interesting.
I bet you don't know another person from Staten Island that plays polo.
I don't know if I know anybody else from Staten Island, to tell you the truth, but that's probably true.
Talk some more about what you just described in terms of getting a 50-acre parcel communities with a passion in the middle that brings them. I ride through Wellington, and there is this community where people have these private jets and their own planes, and in the middle of this
Their
community,
runway.
what is it?
They have a runway.
They have a runway.
Yeah.
So your backyard and your garage is a major runway for people to fly in and just kind of take their planes.
By the way, the horses and the planes, they're not.
They kind of go together.
No.
They don't mix.
A private jet taking off, if you're on a horse, you got an issue.
But this kind of speaks to something. When you have a passion for something, could you build a community that attracts them for their passion and end up living in that community? Because in this case, polo, they'd like to fly their planes and so on and so forth.
I personally believe so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that everybody being locked up in their house for 2-3 years during the pandemic has caused a lot of people to look at what they feel makes them happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And no longer do they want to commit themselves to being handcuffed to a desk and not enjoying life anymore. And there are things like that.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, and this may not be a hot question. What about affordable housing in South Florida? That seems to be a big problem.
There's a huge shortage. Huge. There's only so many things, me personally, that I could really do and do well. So that's not really a sector that I'm looking to develop, although I know it's really needed. I have really good friends that are trying really hard to put together a lot of affordable housing, specifically in the Miami area, because, average rent is quite expensive there these days.
Mm-hmm. And you're bringing people in from all over the country. It's a big tech hub now, but not all of those jobs are going to be the service jobs that are going to be needed.
Right.
And the affordability there is going to be kind of tough to sustain and make it the quality of life, I think, for people who have these jobs. Right?
You couldn't be more accurate. Like, everybody's focusing on the whole Citadel, Ken Griffin thing of all of these really high-end, high-paid executives moving to South Florida, but that's like the top percentage of the tier. There's a lot of people underneath that can't buy $5, $6, $7, $8 million apartments. I think I broke into a little bit of a niche market with my $1 to $3 million apartments, but still, there needs to be affordable housing, like $2,000 a month rents, multifamily stuff like that.
I guess we're not going to solve this today, but what do you think can happen to do that? Because it's not going to be as attractive a place if you can't find any people to do some of the jobs that are necessary that don't pay that well.
I mean, look, hats off to our governor. He put together something recently called the Live Local Act, and they give you more density and development rights if you allocate a certain percentage towards affordable housing. And I think that the government is going to wind up just like he did now. He's just intervening and trying to incentivize people to do it because it needs to be done.
I think that's the way to go, as opposed to have them build it.
They don't want to build it. They're fixing everything else they can at this time. Them building is the last thing they want to do.
That'd be the way to go. Okay, well, we're going to take a little bit of a break here, and we will be back with our final segment of the show, Plead the Fifth.
Thank you.
Step into our state-of-the-art innovation lab and create your digital future. Oz uses cutting-edge technology and 22 years of industry knowledge to enhance customer experience through digital innovation in a variety of expertise. Oz is a leading global consulting company whose services and solutions are trusted by startup, midsize, and even Fortune 500 companies. Get to know more about Oz's Salus, a mobile solution bringing us back to max capacity, and their latest solution, Rainmaker, saving insurance companies years of work. To learn more about Oz and their exciting technologies, visit followoz.com. That's FOLLOWOZ.com.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank in Boca Raton, powered by Celsius, and also co-sponsored by Florida Atlantic University's Adams Center for Entrepreneurship. So, Phil, in this segment of the show, it's called Plead the Fifth, and we'll ask you some questions, and you will have to decide whether you're going to answer those questions or you're going to plead the fifth.
I feel like it's the truth and dare back in the day.
Yeah, a little bit different in that you can only plead the fifth once.
Oh,
If you plead the fifth twice, then you're going to have to take Jamie out to show him the most prime properties that he's going to invest in as a new resident of Florida.
Perfect.
So, Phil, tell us about your celebrity encounters. Tell us about the most famous person you've worked with to find housing for, or in some way, either Las Vegas or here. And what was your experience?
It's a good one. I'm trying to think of which I can't disclose.
Got to check your mental NDAs.
I mean, I did enjoy spending time with Axl Rose in Vegas.
Ah, so tell us about it.
He's the fifth.
An open-ended question.
Yeah, I know. I led myself into that one. It was
Were you helping him buy a condo or what?
touring properties. They were interested in primarily our retail space within the Cosmopolitan.
To sell what?
Investing into a restaurant.
Okay. How about tell us some of the celebrities who are in Miami Beach these days? Michael Caine, right? The Bee Gees, or the one that was left.
Barry. It's Barry.
Barry.
Who do we have in Miami Beach? I mean, there's so many now.
Didn't Jeff Bezos buy some island? Is it in?
He's bought so much property, I'm losing track. But he acquired 3 lots on Lagos Island, Indian Creek as well. But he's got so many lots. I mean, I think the most talked about person now in Miami is Tom and Giselle.
Oh, you mean Tom
Brady?
Yeah, Tom Brady.
Yeah, but they're no longer together.
They're no longer together,
Yeah.
but she has property there as well also.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of eyeballs on them.
Have you met either one of them?
I have.
Okay, maybe that's a truth or
I don't know.
The rest will have to be.
Well, he was at Emerge last year. It's very interesting. He was interviewed at Emerge. I think the mayor was there too. Miami's a happening place.
Yeah, you never know who you're bumping into over there.
So, who is the worst? Describe the worst developer in South Florida. Who is that, and why should we avoid that?
God, I need my legal team on full blast for this one.
Well, you can plead the fifth.
If you don't,
Do I have to mention a name, or can I say
well,
why?
I think what we would do is we would ask you to describe this
Okay.
and say why. And after we got to the end of that, we'd probably ask you the name.
then you can plead the fifth.
And then you can plead the fifth.
The worst thing for me is the developers that come parachuting in from New York, thinking that they know how to do everything better than everyone else down here. And you cannot take a New York style high-rise building and drop it into Miami. And Hallandale Beach is not the same as Miami Beach, vice versa. But I've had a particular developer who just wouldn't listen to one word and decided to do full floors, half floors in a building that never broke more than $500 a foot in the area, and he wanted $1,500 with large units.
And this was something that didn't work out. Did it ever get built?
No. I was right. I could look at a project and in 30 minutes and tell you if it's right.
We won't ask the name at this point.
Yeah, that
a
one
few
I
more
can't
questions.
answer.
Right. Well, you can always come back and plead the fifth.
All right.
What about the argument about condos? You're not buying anything of value because you're not buying the land. I mean, you just have a unit, and it's so, I don't know, the value. I mean, how do you sell the fact that there's value to this when, I have a house, it's on the canal, no fixed bridges. That was, I was told no fixed bridges, right? But then, if I buy an apartment in Fort Lauderdale downtown, I mean, it's great to be where I am and everything, but how do you value that? I mean, what's the inherent value of that?
So some people can't grasp that. And I understand. I understand why. When you think that you have the house, you have a vacant. Worst case, if the house fell down, you still have dirt.
It's worth a lot more than that.
No. But what you have when you purchase a condo is a particular share of ownership within that space that sits on land.
Yes.
So, look, I know a lot of people that have purchased not airspace, but ownership in a condo, and that share of ownership winds up being worth more or less down the road. I mean, hopefully more. Historically, it's been a lot more if you hold it over time. It is worth something. It's worth the same thing. It's the same mindset of a house, to be honest with you.
Well, I guess it's that you have it to use it and have the live, work, and play space in the location. And that's kind of what you're paying.
And you can get out of it. Like if you want to sell it, you can sell a condo. It's just a matter of at that point where the market is. If you price it right, if you don't price it right, it won't sell. Same thing with a house, though.
Yeah,
same
true.
concept.
All right, we're going to put you on the spot. They say that your developments are like your children, right? You have many of them. So, do you have a favorite child?
I have a favorite oldest and a favorite youngest.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Look, the truth is, a lot of the projects I do. I have two kids. A lot of the projects that I'm involved with, a lot of the amenity space has something to do with them and some sort of encounter that I've had over the last decade with them. Whether it's splash pads, basketball courts, walking trails.
But in terms of development itself, you had to count, like, how many developments have you been involved with, would you say, in your career, roughly?
I think 12 or 14 of them at this point.
Is there one that stands out that is like, this is the one? Forget everything else. If I could do it, okay, love one thing would be that one development.
I've been involved, like I said, in a lot, but the one that's always going to have a little place in my heart was my Bay Harbor deal. And it's the smallest one. It's only 8 stories. It's one building is 67 units. The other building is 57 units. But I truly envisioned that thing 10 years ago and was trying for a very long time to get the land, and every square inch of that place, from the floor plans, the closets, the amenities, like I had my hand in the entire thing.
That's good to hear.
So what was your least favorite? What was the biggest mistake you made?
Good one, roll it.
Sometimes the best deals are the ones you don't do. That's I wouldn't say any of them were a mistake. For the most part, the biggest mistakes that were made was just not reading the market correctly. For example, years ago, I had a project with a developer, and he decided he wanted 1,100 square foot, 1-bedroom apartments in Brickell at $1,000 a foot, which put them at 1.1 to 1.5 for a 1-bedroom. The rest of Brickell had 700 square foot units at $700-800 a foot, and it was a clash. And I was like, look, there's a reason that nobody else is doing that. That market's not here right now. Didn't listen. Project still empty dirt.
What's the name of it?
It's getting resurrected. I'll have to plead the fifth on that one.
Well, our work is done.
Yeah, we got him to plead 1/5.
That's good. We need to do that. Brickell's interesting because I don't know, spend a lot of time in Miami, but it seems like a lot of time is spent circling around looking for parking.
Yeah.
That's a big issue. Maybe not in Brickell only, but a lot of the places.
No, it's everywhere, because the amount of visitors that we're getting is insane. I mean, I remember when I spent from 04 through 08 in Vegas, there was nothing going on in Brickell. I came back and I was like spun around. I had no idea what was going on there.
So where do you live? Not your address, but what do you live in? A house, a condo? What do you live in?
Miami Beach, private home. I've thought about other places too, but at the end of the day, I'm very comfortable in the area. I've been there for over 20 years.
Oh.
I know everybody there. My business is there. Everything's there.
Are you on the water?
I am not.
You're not.
I was a young tot when I bought the house.
You got a lot of equity there, I assume. What is the biggest attraction of Miami Beach, would you say?
I would say Miami now is kind of on the same level when it comes to New York, as far as the food, the culture, and the scene, except with better weather, better climate, and a prettier atmosphere.
I mean, differentiate the Miami Beach versus Miami. What's better about Miami Beach?
Miami Beach would have to be the beaches and the barrier islands. I mean, the water in Biscayne Bay is absolutely beautiful. It's turquoise blue, one hair away from Caribbean style water. The boating access in the bay, I happen to love boating, and the boating is spectacular.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you love boating because you have the polo thing. That's not going to work out in Miami Beach.
No, there is no polo in Miami, except we are doing something in November on the sand in front of the Satai. There's going to be a polo match on the beach.
Wow, very cool. Very cool. We'll have to look for that. Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed speaking to you about real estate and my aspirations one of these days of actually getting a condo on the beach or in the city or something. But I'm pretty good with the house on the canal with no fixed bridges.
I'm sure when you're ready, I have something that I can.
Well, in that case, tell our audience how they can get in touch with you if they do have questions or if they're interested in pursuing something.
Of course. I mean, if you try to find me on Instagram, there has been some fake clones, but my real Instagram is phil.gutman. Email address is philip.gutman@gmail.com.
And how many L's in Philip?
1 L and 1 T in my last name.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks again. And thanks also to Jamie for joining us today. And hopefully we'll have Jamie join us again here as a co-host in the future. And we're signing off from the Shrimp Tank. We'll be back next week. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp